People think Jehovah's Witnesses are the gentle ones. The polite knock on a Saturday morning, the soft voices, the men in pressed suits who would never raise their hands. I was married to one of those men for 8 years, and I want to tell you what gentle can cost. There is a kind of punishment that leaves no mark, no bruise, no raised voice, nothing a judicial committee would ever call abuse. Because in The Truth, a husband is the head of his wife the way Christ is the head of the congregation, and a head cannot be accused of harming his own body. So the punishment goes quiet instead. It goes into the silence at dinner, into the turned back at night, into a small notebook kept in a nightstand drawer. It goes into a marriage bed rewritten as a duty, and into a back room where 3 older men decide whether your suffering even counts. Daniel never once struck me. He did not have to. He had 100 quieter ways, and the strangest one of all was the one that made me apologize to him afterward. Stay with me through this if you can. Not to subscribe for me, to be in the room while I say it out loud for the first time. Leave a word below if any of this sounds like a house you have lived in, so the next woman who finds this knows she was never the only one. That is all I am asking. Just stay. The first thing you should understand is how quiet our house was. People imagine punishment as something loud, a thrown plate, a fist, a voice that carries to the neighbors. In my marriage, punishment was the absence of sound. Daniel came home from work at 5:47 every evening. I knew the click of the front door the way other people know their own heartbeat, and on the days I had done something wrong, he simply would not speak to me. Not a slammed door, not a raised voice, just silence, poured over the house like water, for 3 days, sometimes 4. I would set his plate down and he would eat it without looking up. We would kneel together for the evening prayer and he would thank Jehovah for our home and for our marriage and never once say my name. On Tuesday nights, we had family worship at 7 o'clock sharp, the 2 of us at the kitchen table with the watchtower open between us, and he would discuss the article in a calm, even voice, as if nothing at all were wrong, and I would answer in that same calm voice, because to do otherwise would have been to admit there was a self in me that could be wounded. Then we would lie down in the same bed with our backs to each other, and I would lie awake doing the arithmetic of my own sin. What had I said? What had I worn? Which sister had I spent too long talking to in the parking lot after the meeting? By the second day, I would have apologized for things I could not even name, just to make the sound come back. That was the first of them, the silent treatment, except we did not have that name for it. We called it letting him take the lead. We called it respecting his headship. There was a single frame scripture hanging over our couch. Proverbs 3, verses 5 and 6. Lean not on your own understanding, and a bookshelf where other couples kept a television, except ours held only the bound volumes of The Watchtower and The Awake. I was raised in the truth, baptized at 13, married at 18, and I had been taught my whole life that a wife who builds a happy family is a wife who makes herself small enough to fit inside her husband's peace. My mother handed me a pink book the morning of my wedding. She braided my hair, she set the book on the bathroom counter with a post-it marking the 5th chapter, and the only thing she said to me before she closed the door was that he was my head now. I wrote a whole chapter, years later, trying to understand what it does to an 18-year-old girl to be told the morning she marries that she now belongs to a man the way a body belongs to a head. At the time, I just nodded and carried the book to the hotel. So when the silence came, I did not think of it as cruelty. I thought of it as weather, something that simply happened to me, that I had probably caused, that I would have to wait out. Good girl, Sarah. That was the highest thing anyone in the congregation ever said about me, that I was a good girl, a good sister, easy, agreeable, no trouble at all. A woman wrote to me last week and told me that she had been the easy one too, the one nobody ever worried about, and I sat with that for a long time, because being no trouble is its own slow way of disappearing. I had spent my whole life learning to keep my face perfectly still, no matter what was moving underneath it, and I was very, very good at it. Daniel kept a small blue notebook in the top drawer of his nightstand, and in those first years I thought nothing of it. He was a ministerial servant, being groomed to become an elder. He wrote things down. Everyone said he was exemplary. Here is what the notebook was. I did not learn the whole of it until our second year, when I opened the drawer one morning looking for a pen. Daniel tracked things in it. He tracked the dates of my cycle so that he would know, as he once explained to me without a trace of shame, when to be patient with me and when to expect more of me. He tracked the evenings we were intimate in a neat little column with dates. And he kept a private rating of my spiritual progress, whether I had commented at the Watchtower study, whether my hours in field service were up that month, whether I had seemed cheerful enough at the meeting, whether I had been properly submissive in front of the other sisters. A man cannot raise his hand to you if all he ever does is keep records. But I want you to understand what it is to be a grown woman whose own body, whose own moods, whose own monthly bleeding are entries in another person's ledger. None of this was Daniel's invention. That is the part that took me the longest to see. The doctrine of headship teaches that the husband is the head of the wife exactly as Christ is the head of the congregation. That her submission is not obedience to a man's whim, but obedience to God's own arrangement. So a husband who monitors his wife is not controlling her. He is shepherding her. A husband who reads her phone is not invading her. He is guarding his household. A husband who withholds his warmth until she corrects her conduct is not punishing her. He is helping her grow spiritually. Every quiet cruelty had a scripture folded inside it, like a blade inside a loaf of bread. And the scripture made it not merely permitted, but holy. You cannot fight a thing that is wearing the face of God. And then there was what they called the marital due. There is a verse, that the husband and the wife each owe the other their body. And in the truth, it was taught to wives as an obligation, far more than a sharing, a thing you provided whether or not a single part of you wanted to, the way you provided a clean house and a quiet answer. On our wedding night, we were 18 and 22. And neither of us had been told one useful or kind thing by anyone. He treated it as a scheduled duty. In time, I learned to treat it the very same way. I wrote a long chapter trying to explain to people how two frightened children can be handed each other and a rule book and have it called a marriage. I do not tell you any of this to make Daniel into a monster. He was not a monster. He was a man who had been handed a doctrine at the very same age I was handed mine, and he believed, exactly the way that I believed, that he was doing the loving thing. He was as much a captive of headship as I was. The cage simply gave him the larger room to stand in. But the cage was everywhere, for both of us. He read my phone openly, never in secret, because a head has the right to know his own household. He approved my friendships before I was permitted to keep them. There was a worldly woman at the bakery where I worked part-time. I was allowed to work because we needed the money, and I had been allowed no college. And the first time I said her name at the dinner table, I watched him write something down in that small blue notebook, and I learned not to say her name again. I had married him at 18 to escape the constant congregational question of when exactly I was going to marry. There had been no real choice in it, only a narrowing hallway with a single door at the end, and I walked through it because it was the only door there was. By 20, I understood that the marriage I had chosen in order to escape had simply moved the walls in closer. But I promised you the strangest one, the one that made me apologize to him. It was not the silence, and it was not the notebook. It was this. When the loneliness finally grew too large to hide, when I went to him in tears one night in our 6th year, our 5th actually, it was the winter before his brother's wedding, and told him that I felt like I was disappearing inside my own life, he did not argue with me. He did not raise his voice. He told me, gently, in that even and patient tone, that my unhappiness was a spiritual problem. That a sister who is truly filled with Jehovah's Spirit does not feel empty. That if I was suffering, then it was only evidence that I had not been praying enough, not submitting enough, not putting enough of myself into the ministry. And then he offered to bring it before the elders together with me, so that they could help me become the wife I was so plainly failing to be. Do you understand what that does to a person? I had come to him carrying the exact wound that he had made, and within an hour, he had convinced me that the wound itself was the proof of my own bad heart. By the end of that conversation, I was the one apologizing. I was thanking him for his patience with me, for not giving up on me. That is the strangest punishment of all, and the one I have never once heard anyone name out loud. To be hurt by someone, and then be carefully taught that the hurt itself is your sin, until you kneel down and ask forgiveness for bleeding. There is a name for it. I did not have the name for years. The first secular therapist I ever sat across from said the words, coercive control. And then, very carefully, she said, spiritual abuse. And I had to ask her to write them both down on a piece of paper for me, because in 26 years, not one single person had ever given that shape a name. In the truth, we had 100 words for a wife's failures. Unsubmissive, spiritually weak, materialistic, independent-minded. And we did not have one single word for what was being done to her. When I finally asked the elders for a divorce, they did not help me. Daniel had never committed adultery, and adultery was the only key that fit that particular lock. So instead, I sat in the back room of the Kingdom Hall, gray industrial carpet, folding chairs that squeaked when anyone shifted, a box of tissues already placed on the table before I had even sat down, because they knew exactly what those rooms are for. And 3 men I had known my entire life asked me about the inside of my marriage. One of them, Brother Thompson, was 68 years old, with a clipboard resting on his lap, and he asked me, in the softest and kindest voice you can imagine, whether I had always fulfilled my marital due. I am not going to take you all the way into that room tonight. The last full account I gave of it was taken down within the hour. The whole of it is in the book, in the comment section of this video. But I will tell you what I understood as I sat there. That the 2-witness rule meant nothing done to me behind a closed door could ever be counted as a sin, while everything I had quietly felt for 8 years could be weighed and measured by strangers with a questionnaire on a clipboard. The door to that room closes in a particular, final way. I have spent a very long time learning how to stop hearing it close. I have been out 4 months now. I live alone in Columbus, in a small 1-bedroom apartment, and I see a therapist twice a week, the same woman who first gave me the words. I am reading books now that I was never allowed to read, slowly, the way you eat when you have been hungry for a long time. I cut my hair to my shoulders last month, for the first time in my adult life. Daniel had always considered short hair on a woman worldly, and so it had hung past my shoulder blades, uncut, for the entire 8 years. Megan, the woman from the bakery, calls me about once a week just to ask how I am doing, and I'm still learning how to answer that question honestly. My brother Michael has not spoken to me in 7 months. My mother crosses the street when she sees me coming. These are the losses, and I will not pretend to you that they are small. I have to tell you something now that I am not proud of, because I promised myself that if I was going to do this at all, I was going to be honest. Years ago, when I was still the good sister, a 19-year-old bride in our congregation came to me one evening, crying, in the exact way that I would later cry to Daniel. And I told her to pray harder. I told her to wait on Jehovah, to submit, to trust her husband's headship, to examine what she herself might be doing to provoke his coldness. I handed her the very same cage that was quietly closing around me, and I called it love, because I genuinely, truly believed that it was. The system does not only break you, it teaches you to reach out and break the next woman with your own 2 hands, and to feel righteous while you do it. That is the part I am still making my peace with. The blue notebook I never took. I left almost everything in that house, the dishes, the framed scripture, the bound watchtowers on the shelf, but I kept the pink book my mother gave me in a box under my bed. Because I think that one day I will need to remember exactly what I was handed, and exactly how young I was when I reached out and took it. If you grew up in a house where your silence was called your virtue, where your loneliness was called a lack of faith, where a man could empty you out one quiet day at a time and never once raise his hand, I see you. I know that you are not imagining it. I know how long it takes and how much it costs to finally believe that what was done to you had a name all along. My family does not know that these videos exist. The day that they find out, the pressure will begin, and I have seen with my own eyes what that pressure does to a person, so I cannot promise you how long I will get to keep all of this where it is. Every time I make a video that goes into the real, specific details, the platform either quietly demonetizes it or takes it down. The book is everything those videos were never allowed to be. The whole account. The parts that never stay up for long. Some of you have already written to tell me that you recognized your own marriage in this. That you once sat in a room like that one and never said a word of it out loud until now. You were not the only one. I have read every single message. The link is in the comment section. And that is all I have. Freedom hurts less than obedience. I promise you that.